I am continuing in my reading. What I'm doing in this series is to read through the entire standard works of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. This consists of the Bible, the Book of Mormon, the Doctrine and Covenants, and the Pearl of Great Price. I am continuing reading in a chronological order, according to event, not according to publication or volume, so I'm skipping around a bit as I move along. We continue in the Gospels. We have been reading about Christ's trial before the priests, before Pilate. This coming just after his praying in the Garden of Gethsemane, where he was also arrested. All this stuff, but I have to make a correction in some things that I said, because when I was younger, I thought that he was arrested, the Sabbath, the Passover's on a Sabbath, and that's when he's arrested. And then he's crucified just before the next Sabbath, which gave me the impression always growing up that this all takes place over the course of about a week. But that's not true. From the time of his arrest, they have the Last Supper until the crucifixion is about one day. All this is taking place one day. Holy Week begins with the triumphal entry about 4 or 5 days earlier. Today it is generally celebrated, you have the triumphal entry as a Palm Sunday, and then Good Friday is the day of the crucifixion, or the day just before the crucifixion. And so that's the way it's laid out. Now, reading in the scriptures this time, I started seeing that this couldn't have happened over a week. I'm still a little confused because I still thought that the Passover was always on a Sabbath. But apparently I'm wrong. Apparently the Passover is the day before the Sabbath. And then I know that the Feast of Unleavened Bread is an 8-day feast, and the first day is the Sabbath, and the last day is the Sabbath. But I thought the Passover was that first Sabbath of the 8-day feast, but apparently it's the day before. I don't know. I'd have to look into it a little bit more. It's a little confusing on the feast. But that's apparently where we're at. He's been tried. He's been convicted. It is still the day of the Passover. They had the Passover feast, or their Last Supper, during the night, because again, in the Jewish calendar, the day begins with sunset. So the Passover began when the sun went down. They ate the meal. They went to the garden. He was arrested when it was still dark, and he was tried before the priests while it was still dark, possibly in the early twilight, but it was early morning when he was taken to Pilate. Pilate examines him, wants to set him free, but the Jews won't have it, and so now he has been, or at least Pilate has given the Jews permission to do what they want with him. And that's where we pick it up. We're going to read now in Matthew. We're going to read the same thing in all 4 Gospels, but Matthew first, then Mark, then Luke, then John, all in separate videos, and for Matthew, Mark, and Luke at least, I will be doing the Joseph Smith translation separately. So we are going to be reading Matthew chapter 27. It'll be verses 27 through 66. However, I will not be reading verses 52 and 53, and you will see why a little later. So let us get into this. Then the soldiers of the governor took Jesus into the common hall, and gathered unto him the whole band of soldiers. And they stripped him, and put on him a scarlet robe. And when they had plaited a crown of thorns, they put it upon his head, and a reed in his right hand. And they bowed the knee before him, and mocked him, saying, Hail, King of the Jews! And they spit upon him, and took the reed, and smote him on the head. And after they had mocked him, they took the robe off from him, and put his own raiment on him, and led him away to crucify him. And as they came out, they found a man of Cyrene, Simon by name. Him they compelled to bear his cross. And when they were come unto a place called Golgotha, that is to say, a place of a skull, they gave him vinegar to drink, mingled with gall. And when he had tasted thereof, he would not drink. And they crucified him, and parted his garments, casting lots, that it might be fulfilled which was spoken by the prophet, They parted my garments among them, and upon my vesture did they cast lots. And sitting down, they watched him there, and set up over his head his accusation written, This is Jesus, the King of the Jews. Then were there 2 thieves crucified with him, one on the right hand, and another on the left. So this is the actual crucifixion itself. We get a little bit of the torment that they put him through before crucifying him, which wasn't too uncommon among the Romans, but this is the Romans who are doing this, but they are doing it under the direction of the priests, not Pilate. Because remember, Pilate simply turned everything over to the Jewish leaders. And he's basically saying, yes, do what they say. If they say to crucify him, that's on them. So that's what they're doing. They're mocking him. They gave him a reed kind of as a mockery of a king's scepter. They put a crown of thorns on him because he is being accused of claiming to be the king of the Jews. Now, they do get the guy Simon to carry his cross, and I do think that most people probably get this wrong, that he wasn't carrying the whole cross. He was carrying the crossbar. But we don't need to spend too much time on that. It's pretty self-explanatory. There's nothing real hidden in there. So we pick it up in verse 39. And they that passed by reviled him, wagging their heads, and saying, Thou that destroyest the temple and buildest it in 3 days, save thyself. If thou be the Son of God, come down from the cross. Likewise also the chief priests, mocking him with the scribes and elders, said, He saved others, himself he cannot save. If he be the King of Israel, let him now come down from the cross, and we will believe him. He trusted in God. Let him deliver him now, if he will have him. For he said, I am the Son of God. The thieves also, which were crucified with him, cast the same in his teeth. Now from the 6th hour there was darkness over all the land unto the 9th hour. And about the 9th hour Jesus cried with a loud voice, saying, Eli, Eli, lama sabachthani. That is to say, my God, why hast thou forsaken me? Some of them that stood there, when they heard that, said, This man calleth for Elias. And straightway one of them ran and took a sponge, and filled it with vinegar, and put it on a reed, and gave him to drink. The rest said, Let be, let us see whether Elias will come to save him. Jesus, when he had cried again with a loud voice, yielded up the ghost. And behold, the veil of the temple was rent in twain, from the top to the bottom, and the earth did quake, and the rocks rent. We have a general mockery of Christ here, They don't understand that Christ is dying willingly. He stated before that nobody can actually kill him. He has to give his life willingly. He could hang on the cross for eternity, and if he wanted to, he could pull himself down. That wouldn't be a problem, but he's doing it willingly. He is submitting himself to the will of the Father. They don't understand it, and so, look at that. He can't save himself. He doesn't really have the power. So he trusted in God, let God save him. And they're saying, if he dies, we know he wasn't of God. That's what they're saying here. If he was really of God, he'd save himself, then we will believe. Of course, they still wouldn't have believed. We see this a lot in the modern day. People say, if you just do this, I can believe if I see this. No, if you're putting a condition on your faith, then even if that condition is met, you still won't believe. You'll find a new condition on which to delay your faith again. That's what sign seeking is all about. Sign seeking isn't about seeking faith. It is about seeking an excuse to not have faith. And once one excuse no longer works, you just find another one. Now we have him, earlier it says they gave him vinegar mixed with gall and he would not drink. Now he cries out, Why have you forsaken me? They try to give him some vinegar again. Some say, don't, let's see if an angel helps him or whatnot. But that was kind of a painkiller idea. You'd suck on that to numb your body a little bit so that you weren't in as much pain. There's also the statement there, my God, why hast thou forsaken me? Remember that Christ had to experience everything. And this is the last thing he experiences, and that is he experiences the absence of his Father. From the moment of his birth, really the moment of his conception, until this moment, he has never been outside the presence of the Father. He has always felt his Father with him. And now, for the first time in 33 years, he feels the Father withdraw. And he cries out, Why are you doing this? He didn't understand the full extent of what he was going to be doing. Now, it is also very true that I think the Father didn't like watching his Son suffer. He knew Christ had to do this, but he didn't want to watch. And so he withdraws, and Christ feels that final trial. And then he dies. He gives up the ghost. Finally, it is done. He says he cried with a loud voice. Doesn't say what he said, but he gives up the ghost, and the veil of the temple is rent. Now, a lot of Christians want to use this to say the temple is no longer needed. That was Christ saying temples have been done away with. But that's not what this is saying. What this is signifying is not that temples are no longer needed, but that the temple under the Mosaic law is no longer accepted by God. As he said before, you don't put new wine in old bottles. By tearing the veil, he is symbolically shattering the old bottles so that the new wine will not be put in it. Now we pick this up in verse 54. Now when the centurion and they that were with him watching Jesus saw the earthquake and those things that were done, they feared greatly, saying, Truly this was the Son of God. And many women were there beholding afar off, which followed Jesus from Galilee, ministering unto him, among which was Mary Magdalene, and Mary the mother of James and Joseph, and the mother of Zebedee's children. When the even was come, there came a rich man of Arimathæa named Joseph, who also himself was Jesus' disciple. He went to Pilate and begged the body of Jesus. Then Pilate commanded the body to be delivered, and when Joseph had taken the body, he wrapped it in a clean linen cloth, and laid it in his own new tomb, which he had hewn out in the rock. And he rolled a great stone to the door of the sepulchre, and departed. And there was Mary Magdalene and the other Mary sitting over against the sepulchre. Just a few notes here. I did say earlier that there was 3 hours of darkness, from the 6th hour to the 9th hour. 3 hours of darkness, and when Christ died, there is this great earthquake. Now, the hours of darkness, according to Matthew, occur while he is on the cross, before he is dead. The earthquake happens the moment that he dies. Nature itself is crying out in anguish at the death of its God. Now, was the darkness before that, or did it happen at the time? I think there's some discrepancy between the Gospels, but in Matthew, we had the darkness while the 3 hours of darkness he was on the cross. Then he died, and we have the earthquake. So from the moment they hung him on the cross until his death was 3 hours, if we take Matthew for what it says. Now the centurion and the soldiers, when they see it, these are the Romans, and they recognize that nature is mourning the death of its God, and they proclaim that surely he was the Son of God. Now, I don't know if this, I honestly don't think it does mean that they were converted, that they became Christians, because in the Roman and Greek mythologies, the idea of having a son of the gods was not uncommon. But let us continue. Picking it up in verse 62. Now the next day that followed the day of preparation, the chief priests and Pharisees came together unto Pilate, saying, Sir, we remember that deceiver said, while he was yet alive, After 3 days I will rise again. Command therefore that the sepulchre be made sure until the 3rd day, lest his disciples come by night and steal him away, and say unto the people, He is risen from the dead. So the last error shall be worse than the first. Pilate said unto them, Ye have a watch. Go your way, make it as sure as ye can. So they went and made the sepulchre sure, sealing the stone and setting a watch. The women were there to bury Christ. Joseph of Arimathæa was a disciple, asked for the body, they bury it in the sepulchre. Joseph is the one that actually put the stone over the sepulchre. This wouldn't have been an unusual thing to have a stone that would block the sepulchre so that you wouldn't have as much of the odor of the decaying bodies. It says they go and seal the stone. So it's no longer just a stone in front of the door, but it is sealed. They don't, maybe they cement it in. I don't know exactly how they would have sealed it, but they seal it so that it can't be moved. And this way they're thinking, they're accusing, or they're preemptively accusing the apostles of stealing the body and making a fraud of the resurrection. Now this video is getting very long, and so I am going to end it here. We will do the Joseph Smith translation in our next video, so I will see you there.